"If you don't love your wife, I can be the other one," said the Apache girl. But the cowboy had no wife. The sun hung low over the dusty western town, casting long shadows across the wooden sidewalks. The air was dry and warm, carrying the faint smell of horses and gunpowder. Townsfolk moved slowly, their faces tired from long days under the scorching sun. But the saloon at the center of the town was alive with activity. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft strumming of a piano spilled out from its doors, mixing with the occasional sound of boots against the wooden floor. Sitting alone at a corner table was a man known by the locals simply as the Cowboy. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that told stories of long days in the sun and nights under the open sky. His dark eyes were sharp and observant, though they rarely showed emotion. His clothes were simple but practical. A faded shirt, worn trousers, and a hat that had seen better days. He sipped slowly from his glass of water, watching the room quietly. He spoke little, and people in town mostly left him alone. That suited him just fine. Outside the saloon, a woman appeared from the edge of the town. She moved with a confidence that made her hard to miss. Her skin was sun-kissed, and her dark hair tied loosely swayed with every step. She was not from the town. Her clothes were different, practical yet elegant in a way that showed both skill and freedom. She was from a world outside the town, a world where the land was wide and wild, where survival required courage, skill, and a sharp mind. Her eyes immediately found the cowboy. Something about him caught her attention. Perhaps it was his quiet strength, or the way he seemed to be a part of the town without truly belonging to it. She smiled to herself, amused by the thought of speaking to him. Most men in this town were boastful or rude. This one was different, calm and watchful, like a hawk perched silently on a branch. She stepped inside the saloon, and the door swung behind her with a soft creak. The murmur of conversation quieted slightly as people noticed the newcomer. She walked confidently toward the cowboy, her eyes never leaving his. When she reached his table, she leaned slightly forward and said, her voice clear and bold, "If you don't love your wife, I can be the other one." The cowboy froze for a moment. He blinked, trying to process what he had just heard. He had expected many things in his life, but a bold comment like that from a stranger was not one of them. He looked up at her, meeting her gaze directly. His voice, calm but tinged with amusement, finally broke the silence. "I don't have a wife," he said simply. The woman laughed, a sound that was light and warm, like sunlight breaking through clouds. She had expected some hesitation, some attempt at explanation, or embarrassment. Instead, here was a man who spoke with honesty, without pretending. That honesty intrigued her even more. "Well," she said, tilting her head slightly, "that makes things simpler, doesn't it?" For a moment they sat in silence, studying each other. The saloon seemed to fade away around them. The clinking of glasses, the laughter, and the music all became distant background noise. It was just the two of them, two strangers from very different worlds, meeting by chance in a dusty western town. The cowboy gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit if you want. But I warn you, I don't talk much." She smiled again and lowered herself onto the chair. "Good," she said.
I like listening anyway. Talking can wait.
And so they sat, quietly observing the saloon. The cowboy noticed the way she moved, confident and free, like someone who had spent more time in the open wilderness than in towns. She noticed the way he watched, always alert, as if he could read people's intentions without a word being spoken. It was a rare connection, a silent understanding that neither could explain yet. After a few minutes, she leaned forward again, curiosity shining in her eyes. "So, what brings you here?" she asked. The cowboy shrugged. "Just passing through," he said. "Sometimes towns are quiet enough to rest. Sometimes they are lively enough to keep boredom away." "I've been moving a lot lately." She nodded, understanding more than he realized. "I know that feeling. The land calls, and sometimes the town does too. But the land never lies. It gives you what you earn and teaches you quickly if you're not careful." He looked at her, impressed by her words. You speak like someone who has traveled far and seen much.
I have, she admitted, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and memories.
And I've learned to survive. I've learned to read the signs in the wind, the stars in the sky, and the footprints in the dust. They tell stories people don't notice in towns. The cowboy leaned back slightly, considering her words. There was truth in what she said, a sharpness that came from experience. Most people in the town never thought about the land beyond the streets. She, however, seemed to live there, in the vast open spaces, even when she was standing in a crowded saloon. Their conversation was interrupted briefly by the saloon owner, a cheerful man with a thick mustache, who came over to take their order. The Apache girl asked for water and a small meal, while the cowboy declined, satisfied with what he had. The owner left with a friendly nod, leaving the two alone again. The cowboy finally broke the silence, curiosity now mixing with his usual calm demeanor. "You're not from around here. What's your story?" She smiled a little mischievously. "Stories take time," she said, "and some stories are better shared while walking under the open sky. You should come with me, if you want. There's a place not far from here where the wind tells the truth. And the earth? Well, it speaks in ways towns cannot understand." He raised an eyebrow, surprised by the invitation. Most people would not dare speak so boldly to him, let alone invite him into the wilderness with them. Yet something about her voice, her confidence, and the curiosity in her eyes made him consider it. "Maybe," he said slowly. "Maybe I will." The Apache girl's smile widened, sensing a small victory in his cautious response. She knew that trust had to be earned, that the cowboy was careful for a reason. Many people in towns were not honest, and she could sense that he had lived with deception enough to be wary. But there was a spark of honesty in him, rare and bright. That spark was enough to intrigue her. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, casting the town in a warm, soft glow. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the smell of sage and dust from the surrounding plains. The cowboy stood, brushing dust from his trousers. The Apache girl followed, her movements silent but deliberate. Together they stepped into the quiet streets of the town, two figures moving through the fading light. As they walked, she spoke again, softly this time. "The land out there, it doesn't lie. People lie, but the land is honest. It will show you who you are, and sometimes, who you want to be." He looked at her, the first genuine curiosity touching his usually reserved expression. "And what do you want to be?" he asked. She paused, thinking. "Free," she said finally. "Free and strong. I want to live my life without chains, without lies, without fear." He nodded, understanding more than words could say. He had spent years avoiding attachments, believing they would weigh him down. Yet, as he walked beside this bold, fearless woman, he felt something stir inside him, a sense of possibility, of connection, of a world larger than the one he had known. The town faded behind them as they reached the edge of the plains. The open land stretched before them, wide and untamed, with the last rays of the sun painting it in gold. The Apache girl looked out over the horizon, then back at him, her eyes bright with excitement. "This is where the real story begins," she said. He glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of anticipation. The world beyond the town was unknown, wild, and perhaps dangerous. But with her, it also seemed full of possibility. And so, with the sky above turning deep blue and stars beginning to sparkle faintly, the cowboy and the Apache girl set off together. The town was behind them, and ahead lay the wide open land full of secrets, challenges, and the promise of an unexpected connection. The first step of their journey had begun, not just through the land, but through a bond that neither fully understood yet, a bond that would be tested, challenged, and ultimately reveal truths about who they were and who they could become. It was the start of something neither of them could have predicted, a meeting by chance, a bold statement, and a simple truth. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters are the ones that change a life forever. The morning sun broke over the horizon, painting the wide plains with streaks of gold and orange. The cowboy and the Apache girl were already on the move. They had left the small town behind, trading the dusty streets and crowded saloon for the open, untamed land. The air smelled of dry earth, sage, and the faint sweetness of distant wildflowers. The vastness of the plain stretched endlessly in all directions, a land of freedom and danger both. The Apache girl walked ahead, her steps confident and sure. She carried a small pack on her back and a long rifle rested across her shoulder. Every so often she glanced over her shoulder at the cowboy, who followed quietly behind. He moved like someone accustomed to the outdoors, but there was a difference in his step, a careful, measured watchfulness. He was strong and capable, but she could tell that he had spent more time avoiding trouble than seeking adventure. "So," she said suddenly, breaking the silence, "why do you move so much? Surely there are places you could call home?" The cowboy adjusted his hat against the sun and shrugged. "I've never been good at staying in one place. Towns change, people change, and I've had my share of losses. It's easier to keep moving than to risk settling and losing everything again."
She nodded, understanding more than he realized.
She too had known loss and the constant pull of the open land. "I know the feeling," she said. "Sometimes the land is the only place that feels right. People are unpredictable. Land is honest." He looked at her, impressed by her insight. "You seem to know this world well," he said. "I've been around, but I don't know if I've ever really known it." She smiled a little proudly. "I've learned to listen. The wind tells stories if you pay attention. The river tells secrets, and the animals, they notice everything. You just have to learn to see it." The cowboy nodded thoughtfully. He had spent years outdoors, but he had rarely taken the time to truly observe the land in that way. There was something about the way she spoke, her eyes bright and confident, that made him think differently about the world around him. As they walked, the land began to change. The flat plains gave way to rocky hills, and the path became narrower and harder to follow. The Apache girl led the way, moving swiftly and gracefully over the uneven ground. Occasionally she would stop, crouching low to examine tracks in the dirt. She pointed out subtle signs that even he might have missed: a disturbed patch of earth, a faint hoof print, a broken twig. "Someone passed this way recently," she said, her voice low. "Could be a traveler or could be something else. We'll have to be careful." He followed her lead, impressed by her skill. "I've seen a lot in my life, but you notice everything." She shrugged, smiling. "When you live like I do, you have to." One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and you don't survive. It's not about being better than anyone else, it's about being ready for whatever comes. Hours passed as they climbed higher into the hills. The sun rose higher, warming the earth, and the wind began to pick up, carrying dust and small pebbles across the path. They stopped near a small creek to rest and drink. The water was clear and cold, rushing quickly over smooth stones. The cowboy knelt beside it, cupping his hands to drink, while the Apache girl knelt opposite him, watching him carefully. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. He looked up at her, his expression guarded but not unfriendly. "A man's life is full of things he doesn't want to talk about," he said. "But yes, I've had my share of trouble. I've seen people die, friends lost, and I've had to make choices that still weigh on me." She nodded quietly, not pushing him for more. She understood the weight of unspoken memories. "I've had my share too," she said. "It's part of living in the world the way we do." "But it makes us stronger, doesn't it?" He thought about her words, the sound of the creek flowing beside them, the warm sun on his back. There was truth in what she said. He had always tried to ignore his past, but being here, with her, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Connection. After their brief rest, they continued walking. The land became wilder, the path less clear. Thorny bushes scratched at their clothes, and rocks threatened to trip them with every step. Yet with each obstacle, they learned more about each other. The Apache girl moved with ease, climbing rocks and jumping small streams as if she belonged there. The cowboy followed, careful but determined, watching her closely, learning from her movements. As the sun reached its peak, they found a small clearing, perfect for setting up a temporary camp. The Apache girl quickly gathered firewood, arranging it neatly for a small fire. The cowboy helped, impressed by her efficiency. Within moments, a small flame crackled to life, casting dancing shadows across their faces. They sat across from each other, the fire warming them against the cool wind that had begun to blow. The Apache girl took out a small leather pouch and offered him some dried meat and berries. He accepted, nodding his thanks. They ate in silence for a while, listening to the wind and the soft crackle of the fire. "You're different from most men I've met," she said finally, breaking the quiet. "You're quiet, yes, but there's honesty in you. You don't pretend, you don't boast, and yet you watch everything." He looked at her, considering her words. "Most people in towns, they don't notice anything real," he said. "They're too busy with gossip, appearances, and games. I've learned it's easier to keep to myself." She smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. "I've seen that too, but out here, it's different. People can lie, yes, but the land doesn't. It tells you the truth if you're willing to see it." The cowboy nodded, feeling a growing respect for her. There was something in her presence that made the world feel sharper, clearer, and more alive. He had spent so long moving through life without truly noticing it, but with her, he began to see things differently. Hours passed, and the conversation drifted from stories of survival to lighter topics. The Apache girl told him about the animals she had tracked, the rivers she had crossed, and the nights she had spent under the stars. She described moments of beauty she had witnessed, the way sunlight glinted off a river, the songs of birds at dawn, the way the wind whispered through the canyons. He listened, captivated by her words. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of wonder, a reminder that life could be more than just survival and caution. Her stories painted a world full of color, danger, and beauty all at once. As evening approached, they sat together by the fire watching the sky turn shades of pink, orange, and purple. The wind had calmed, and the world seemed to pause for a moment. The Apache girl looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You're not used to this, are you?" she asked softly. "No," he admitted, "but I like it more than I thought I would." She smiled, a quiet, warm smile. "Good. Because there's more out here than just the land. There are stories waiting to be lived, challenges to face, and sometimes people to trust." He looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. Trust had always been hard for him. He had learned to rely only on himself, to keep people at a distance. But with her, something felt different. There was a sense of honesty, of openness, that made it easier to let go, even a little. The night fell, and the stars began to fill the sky. They lay back on the soft grass, staring upward, letting the vastness of the universe sink in. The Apache girl pointed out constellations, telling stories of her people, of heroes, and of lessons learned from the stars. The cowboy listened, fascinated by her knowledge and the gentle way she shared it. For a long time they remained silent, letting the night speak for them. The wind rustled softly through the grass. The distant cry of an owl echoed through the hills, and the fire crackled gently. In that quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them. A growing bond, a mutual understanding, and a sense that their meeting was not by chance. When they finally lay down to sleep, side by side but still giving each other space, the cowboy felt something he had not felt in years, a sense of peace. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, dangers, and tests of character, but for the first time he felt ready to face them, not alone, but with someone he could trust by his side. And so, under the wide open sky, with the stars above and the land around them, the cowboy and the Apache girl began a journey together, not just across the plains, but into the possibility of friendship, trust, and perhaps something more. The first step of that journey had been taken, and neither of them could have known just how far it would carry them. The morning sun rose slowly, casting soft light over the rugged hills and wide plains. The cowboy and the Apache girl were already on their feet, packing their small camp and preparing for another day of travel. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and wildflowers. It was a quiet morning, but both of them knew that the day ahead could bring unexpected challenges. They followed a narrow trail that wound between the hills. The Apache girl moved ahead with confidence, scanning the ground for tracks and signs, while the cowboy followed, careful to keep up without disturbing the terrain. They had traveled together for several days, learning each other's habits, strengths, and quirks. Trust was growing slowly, quietly, like the morning sun warming the earth. As they descended into a shallow valley, the Apache girl suddenly stopped, crouching low. Her sharp eyes had noticed something the cowboy might have missed: a series of footprints leading off the main trail. They were fresh, and the mark suggested someone had passed through not long ago. "Someone's been here," she said, her voice low but tense. "Could be travelers or trouble. We need to be careful." The cowboy knelt beside her, examining the tracks. He traced the impressions in the dirt with his finger. "They look deliberate," he said thoughtfully. "Not random wanderers. Whoever it is, they know this land." She nodded, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her rifle. "Then we'll have to be ready. It's not always about fighting, but we can't ignore danger either." They moved cautiously, keeping to the shadows of the hills as they approached the edge of the valley. As they crested a small rise, they saw a figure in the distance. A man, rough-looking, with a weathered face and dark clothes. He seemed to be watching them from a distance, motionless, like a predator waiting for the right moment. The cowboy's hand instinctively went to the rifle slung across his back, though he did not raise it yet. The Apache girl placed her hand on his arm, signaling him to hold. "Let's not rush," she whispered. "Observe first. We might not need to act." They watched the man for several minutes. He made a sudden movement, then retreated behind a boulder. The Apache girl's eyes narrowed. He's not just passing by. He's hiding, waiting, and judging us. We'll have to be careful in town, too. Rumors travel faster than people think. The cowboy frowned. "Rumors?" She gave him a sharp look. "People in these towns, they gossip. They see two strangers traveling together, and they start imagining stories. Sometimes it's harmless. Sometimes it isn't." He considered her words, realizing how small towns could twist the truth. He had spent years avoiding attention, and he knew how quickly gossip could turn into trouble. With her beside him, though, he felt more confident in facing whatever came their way. They continued carefully, keeping the figure at a distance as they made their way down into the valley. The sun climbed higher, and the wind began to pick up, carrying dust and dry leaves across the ground. They moved silently, relying on signals and glances to communicate. By midday, they reached a small stream where they paused to rest. The Apache girl knelt beside the water, dipping her hands in to drink. The cowboy sat nearby, his eyes scanning the surroundings even as he drank. "Do you ever worry about people following you?" she asked, her tone calm but curious. "All the time," he admitted. "I've learned that being alone doesn't mean being safe. People can be unpredictable, dangerous, but moving alone also teaches you how to survive." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I've felt the same. But when you travel with someone you trust, it changes things. You learn to depend on each other, even just a little. That's when you really start to see a person." He glanced at her, feeling the truth in her words. He had spent years avoiding attachments, avoiding trust, and yet here he was, relying on her guidance, her instincts, her courage. It was strange, but not unpleasant. Their quiet moment was suddenly broken by a shout from the distance. Both of them froze, alert and tense. The sound came again, louder this time, accompanied by the noise of hooves pounding against the ground. The cowboy quickly grabbed his rifle, scanning the hills. The Apache girl did the same, her eyes sharp as a hawk. A group of men appeared on the ridge above them, riding horses quickly toward the valley. They were armed, rough-looking, and their intentions were clear. The Apache girl's lips pressed together in determination. "We have to move, now." The cowboy nodded, leading the way through the trees and rocks, using the terrain for cover. The men pursued, shouting and brandishing weapons. But the cowboy and the Apache girl moved with skill, ducking behind boulders and keeping low. Their teamwork was seamless, unspoken but precise. After several tense minutes, they reached a narrow canyon where the pursuers were forced to slow down. The Apache girl looked at him, her eyes bright with urgency. "We need to make them believe we went one way while we escape another."
He understood immediately. They split, moving silently through different paths in the canyon, then regrouped a few minutes later at a hidden cave the Apache girl had noticed earlier.
The men had slowed, shouting and looking for them in the wrong direction. Inside the cave, they rested briefly, catching their breath. The cowboy's heart was still racing, but he felt a growing respect for her bravery and skill. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "I've never seen anyone move like that," she smiled, though it was brief and tired. "Experience," she said, "and necessity. When you rely on yourself and no one else, you get better, fast." As they recovered, the cowboy realized something important. He had faced danger many times before, but rarely had he felt the sense of partnership he felt now. He was no longer alone. There was someone he could trust, someone who watched his back as he watched hers. It was a new feeling, one he was not sure he was ready for, but one he did not want to let go of. Later, as the sun began to lower again, they emerged from the canyon and continued their journey. The Apache girl led them to a small ridge overlooking the town they had left days before. The view was wide and expansive, with the town small and distant below them. "You see," she said, pointing toward the town, "people see what they want to see. They hear what they want to hear. And when two strangers travel together, well, stories grow like wildfire." The cowboy's expression darkened slightly. "Rumors, they can ruin people."
"They already have," she said softly. "That's why we need to be careful."
"But we're smarter than them. We don't need to fight their stories. We just need to be ready for anything they try." The cowboy nodded, feeling a sense of determination he had not felt in years. With her by his side, he was willing to face whatever challenges came, whether from the land, from danger, or from the narrow minds of townsfolk. As evening fell, they found another small clearing to rest for the night. The Apache girl started a small fire, and the cowboy helped, gathering wood and arranging stones around it. They ate quietly, the silence comfortable now, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. "You handled yourself well today," she said finally, breaking the quiet. "Most people would have panicked," he shrugged modestly. "Experience," he said, "and I had a good teacher." She laughed softly, the sound light and warm in the evening air. "Maybe. But you also have courage. Quiet, steady courage. That's rarer than most people realize." He looked at her, the firelight reflecting in her eyes, and felt a strange warmth in his chest. He was not used to compliments, and yet her words felt genuine, not empty. He realized that he valued her opinion more than he cared to admit. Night fell completely, and the stars emerged in full brilliance scattered across the velvet sky. They lay back on the soft grass near their fire, looking upward. The Apache girl pointed out constellations, telling stories of heroes, spirits, and lessons from the stars. The cowboy listened, fascinated by the depth of her knowledge and the calm confidence with which she spoke. "Do you think we'll ever go back to that town?" he asked quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Perhaps," she said. "But not yet. Not until we're ready. There are things to learn, places to see, and people to trust or avoid before we can go back." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had always avoided towns and people for fear of trouble, but now, with her, he realized that the journey was as important as the destination. Trust, courage, and understanding were lessons he was finally ready to embrace. As they drifted into sleep, the fire dying to embers, the cowboy felt a strange mix of anticipation and peace. Challenges were coming. He could feel it, but for the first time in a long while, he was not alone. The Apache girl was beside him, brave, smart, and fearless. Together they would face whatever the land and the people threw at them. And deep down he knew that their bond, forged in danger and shared experience, would grow stronger still. The story of their journey was only halfway complete, and the trials ahead would test their courage, their trust, and their hearts. But for now, in the quiet of the wild plains, they were ready for anything. The morning sun spread soft light over the plains, painting the grass and hills with a golden glow. The cowboy and the Apache girl had been traveling together for several days since the incident in the canyon. Their bond had grown strong, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences in the wild. Yet they both knew that challenges still awaited them, both from the land and from people. As they approached the town they had left earlier, the Apache girl paused on a small ridge overlooking the buildings below. "We'll have to be careful," she said. "Rumors spread quickly here. People might think things that aren't true about us. We can't control what they say, but we can control how we act." The cowboy nodded, feeling the familiar tension rise. He had always avoided towns for this reason. Gossip, judgment, and misunderstanding were dangerous in their own way. But he also realized something. He no longer wanted to hide. He trusted her, and with her by his side, he felt stronger, braver, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As they descended toward the town, the streets seemed quiet, almost too quiet. Windows were shuttered and a few cautious townsfolk peeked from behind curtains. Their arrival had clearly sparked curiosity. Whispers floated on the wind as they passed, and the cowboy could feel the weight of eyes on them. A group of men gathered near the saloon, the same rough figures who had caused trouble before. The Apache girl's eyes narrowed. "They're the ones stirring stories. We'll have to confront them calmly, or it could get messy." The cowboy's hand rested on the rifle at his side, though he did not draw it. "Calmly," he repeated. "We do this carefully." They walked into the center of town, heads held high yet cautious. As expected, the men approached, shoving one another and sneering. "Well, well," one of them said, his voice rough. "Look who's back, the cowboy and his new friend. People say strange things when you're around." The Apache girl's eyes flashed, but she remained composed. "Rumors are like smoke," she said softly, her voice firm. "They rise and vanish if you don't feed them." The men laughed, but the cowboy stepped forward, his calm presence commanding attention. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said clearly. "We're passing through, same as always. If you have a problem with that, we can settle it without lies or rumors." The townsfolk watched silently. It was clear the cowboy's reputation carried weight. His honesty and quiet strength made people reconsider before acting hastily. The men exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that their attempts at intimidation might not succeed. But just as attention seemed to ease, a commotion arose near the edge of the town. A rider appeared, galloping fast, shouting that a group of bandits was attacking the nearby ranch. The cowboy and the Apache girl immediately turned their attention to the new threat. Without hesitation, they mounted their horses and rode toward the ranch. The Apache girl led the way, her instincts guiding them through paths only someone familiar with the land would know. The cowboy followed closely, his calm determination matched by her swift, skilled movements. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic. The bandits had surrounded the ranch, threatening the workers and stealing supplies. The cowboy assessed the situation quickly, formulating a plan in silence. The Apache girl rode beside him, her eyes scanning for weak points in the bandits' formation. "Divide and distract," he said quietly. "You take the right flank, I'll take the left. We'll meet in the center and push them back." She nodded, understanding immediately. "Ready when you are." The attack was precise and controlled. They moved with skill and purpose, catching the bandits off guard. The Apache girl's sharp aim and quick reflexes, combined with the cowboy's strength and clever tactics, forced the intruders to retreat. Within moments, the ranch was safe, and the workers cheered, grateful and relieved. After the danger had passed, the cowboy and the Apache girl dismounted, breathing heavily but triumphant. "You handled yourself well," the cowboy said, admiration clear in his voice. So did you, she replied, smiling. We make a good team. The ranch owner approached, bowing his head in gratitude. Thank you both, he said earnestly. You saved us from a disaster. Not many people would have the courage or skill to do what you did. The cowboy nodded, giving a modest shrug. We were in the right place at the right time. But as they prepared to leave, the whispers in the town began again. Louder this time. People had seen the cowboy and the Apache girl riding together, fighting off bandits and helping the ranch. Soon, stories twisted into rumors of a deeper connection between them. Some were curious, some skeptical, and a few were envious. The Apache girl glanced at the cowboy, concern in her eyes. It seems the rumors aren't finished, she said softly. He looked at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. Let them talk, he said. We know the truth. That's what matters. As they rode out of town, the sun lowered in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. The open plain stretched before them, vast and free. The cowboy felt a sense of relief mixed with a new feeling he had not experienced in years. Hope. For the first time, he imagined a future where he didn't have to be alone, where trust and companionship were possible. The Apache girl sensed the change in him. You've grown, she said quietly, almost to herself. You're learning that it's okay to rely on someone else, at least a little. He looked at her, warmth in his eyes. And I've learned that having someone beside you doesn't make you weaker. It makes you stronger. You've shown me that. They continued their journey together, the bond between them deepening with each passing mile. They faced challenges, yes, rough terrain, unpredictable weather, and occasional dangers, but they faced them as a team, relying on trust, skill, and understanding. The cowboy had spent years avoiding people and towns, but now he realized that connection, friendship, and even love were worth the risk. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, they stopped by a quiet river. The water reflected the fiery colors of the sky, and the air was calm, carrying only the gentle sounds of nature. The Apache girl knelt by the water, cupping her hands to drink, while the cowboy stood nearby watching her with quiet admiration. You know, he said finally, his voice soft, when I met you, I thought you were bold, maybe reckless. But now, I see how smart, brave, and honest you are, and I realize I've never met anyone like you. The Apache girl looked up, her eyes meeting his. I could say the same about you, she replied, a gentle smile on her lips. You're steady, strong, and true. I've trusted very few people in my life, but I trust you. He took a deep breath, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Then, I don't want this journey to end. I don't want to go back to being alone. She smiled softly, a playful glint in her eyes. I don't either. We've faced enough danger to know we can face more. Together. The moment was quiet, filled with unspoken words and shared understanding. For the first time, they allowed themselves to imagine a future, not just surviving, but living, fully, side by side. The next days were spent traveling peacefully across the plains. They shared stories of the past, dreams for the future, and small moments of laughter and joy. The cowboy taught her some tricks he had learned for survival, while she showed him ways to read the land and anticipate danger. Their bond was growing stronger, built not just on attraction, but on respect, trust, and shared experience. Finally, they reached a hill overlooking a wide valley, where the sun was setting in a blaze of color. The town they had avoided for so long was far behind them, and the horizon stretched endlessly ahead. The Apache girl turned to him, her expression serious but warm. Whatever comes next, she said, we face it together. The land, the people, the stories, we'll handle them as a team. And maybe we'll finally let ourselves be happy. He nodded, feeling a sense of peace he had never known. Yes, he said softly. Together, as the stars began to appear in the sky, they stood side by side, looking out over the vast plains. The journey had changed them both. The cowboy had learned to trust, to open his heart, and to see the beauty in connection. The Apache girl had found a companion who respected her strength and shared her courage. Together, they were stronger than they had ever been alone. And so, under the wide open sky, with the land stretching endlessly before them and the stars above shining bright, the cowboy and the Apache girl stepped forward into their future. The story that had begun with a bold statement, a chance encounter, and a shared journey through danger and discovery had reached a new beginning. They were no longer strangers. They were partners, friends, and perhaps something more. The plains stretched endlessly, full of challenges, beauty, and freedom. And for the first time, the cowboy felt at home. Not in a town, not in solitude, but in the shared journey of life with someone he trusted and cared for deeply. The journey was far from over, but for now, they had found peace, courage, and each other. And that, more than anything, was worth everything they had faced.